This is Anthony Rogers.
And Chris Cha.
And we're from Rice University with the Houston Asian American Archive Project, and we're here today with Dr. Daniel Watanabe. So, could you start off telling us where you were born?
I was born in Los Angeles. I'll give you the age. The birth was in 1929, so that makes me 81 years old now. I lived in Los Angeles until I was 6 years old. I went to Japan with my parents. Since my father wanted to start a business. My father was a Japanese national. My mother was a second-generation Japanese American. And this was, before the days before there was any war clouds pending. But upon arriving in Japan, and within a matter of few years, then the war started. So we were sort of there during the war period. I was just a kid, so my experience was very brief. But after that, after the war ended, I finished high school, and immediately, since I was going to return to the U.S. However, I would have been drafted since I was that age, so I opted to enlist in the U.S. regular Army, and served in the U.S. Occupation troops for 3.5 years. During which time I did a lot of intelligence work for General Headquarters. This is what they call MacArthur's headquarters, as an interpreter and bilingual specialist. When the Korean War started, we were also dispatched to Korea to interrogate Koreans, prisoners of war, because they spoke Japanese. So I spent a year in the war zone. Then I came back to the U.S., and then since then I went to college, etc. So I came back in the 51, 52-ish, maybe around about that time. Then I've been here, ever since. I'm going to school, graduate school, and all that. What brought me to Texas is that I was a faculty at New York Medical College in New York City, and our principal, a investigator at the New York Medical College, transferred his grant and research team to Baylor College of Medicine in Houston. And all the staff researchers came with him, and I was one of them. That's the reason I came to Houston. And I've been here ever since.
Could you explain what it was like moving from the United States to Japan when you were younger?
Well, since I was quite young, I don't know whether my impression was this was kind of new. And so, by the way, when I went to Japan, I didn't speak a word of Japanese.
Oh.
So I had to take something, I couldn't go to school. So I had to take 1 year off to learn the language. But I had no difficulty. I don't remember any difficulty. There was a little prejudice because, I'm a Japanese-faced guy from America. So I'm a practically sort of foreigner. And, another thing too, we didn't have crew cuts. We didn't have long hair like we do today. And Japanese all had crew cuts. So I stood out, and because of that, I was harassed, or I was bullied, I guess. It was a little bit different, but soon since I got myself a hair crew cut, so I looked just like anybody else. So then for me at that age, I didn't really think too much about anything. And then when the war started and all that, other than the notion that I come from a different place, I think I was just as much of a Japanese and the others, and it couldn't be sort of noticeable, so to speak. So we saw everything. We saw the bombing of Tokyo, and the war effort, the food rationing, and the way things are run at that time, air raids, on a daily basis and all that kind of stuff until the surrender. Then things really changed with the occupation to the American landing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it changed the entire mood, so to speak. Again, since my family all spoke English, and so we sort of fit in that quite well. Then only then, even my father, who was a Japanese national, was starting to be recognized, and he was a very good bridge to bridge the gap between the occupation troops and the Japanese natives, so to speak.
Well, what did your father do?
My father was a aeronautical engineer, and he was very good mechanically and all that. He, by the age of 21 in Los Angeles, he actually designed and assembled a flying aircraft, 5 of those, in his garage. He's a real pioneer in that sense. This is the day when the Lindbergh had not flown across the Atlantic. There was a big prize out for anybody who circumnavigated the globe on a solo flight. There was a big prize for that from an English publisher. So my father was thinking, well, he's going to build that plane to do it. And he had built one. He had a pilot. He's not a pilot himself, but and aimed at that. So he had some very big dreams. Unfortunately, the last airplane that he built, and during a test flight, it ran into the Rocky Mountains and crashed and killed the pilot. So then he gave up that idea. He blamed it on the plane, but it was simply it was a natural disaster, not mechanical failure or anything.
Was your father in L.A.?
Yeah.
When did he move to the United States?
I don't know the year that he wasn't here, but he came to the U.S. when he was 16 years old to study.
So, and where did you live in Japan?
Mostly in Tokyo area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how did your parents feel about moving to Japan?
Let's see. I didn't know, or I had no notion what it is. My father wanted. Oh, I'll tell you one of the reasons why he had to go back. He was doing very well in Los Angeles, but as a Jap, he couldn't get a job as an aeronautical engineer. They won't hire a Japanese. So there was a job discrimination for his talent. So besides, he had a few patents, so he wanted to go start business in Japan. He had capital, patents, and he was to go back to Japan and start his own business. Everything was all set up, except that the war started. So otherwise he would have been quite successful. He personally knew the engineer who built the Spirit of St. Louis for Lindbergh. He knew almost all the heads of the American aircraft company. It was like a circle of people in that time. We're talking about Boeing, Curtiss, all those American companies, aircraft companies, which were just starting to become giants in their industry. So after the war, he had a chance to get invited, and he went back and saw all of them too. So had he lived, he unfortunately died when he was 57 from stomach cancer. He couldn't go any further. Otherwise, he was just about being able to get into that. Because as I said, he knew all these big names personally. So it's kind of unfortunate. And also, it was just now. Until now, he was a returnee from the U.S., which is the Japanese thought he might be possibly a spy from there or something,
see.
that type of thing. So there was a prejudice on him, I'm sure. I know, I've heard that the secret police were shadowing him during the war years.
So, why did your parents move back to the United States in 1951?
Why did I?
Mm-hmm. Oh, you didn't? Just you? Your parents didn't move with you?
No. My parents stayed there because he was just starting.
Oh, okay.
He was in a good shape and all that kind of thing. Even my brother stayed there to go to the university there. I came back to the U.S. to go to college.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did your family consider themselves Americans in Japan?
My mother did, certainly, because she was American born. She's the second generation, yeah. And my father, well, he's just as fluent and used to American ways. And then, so he could have come back to the U.S. or wherever he could find a good job and all that. As I said, he just never had that chance. He just died rather on the young side on account of that. It was kind of unfortunate.
Did you have a job at all when you lived in Japan?
No, I was still, I just, barely finished high school and all that. So no, I
Okay.
didn't, no.
Did you attend public high school in Japan?
Oh yeah, sure, of course. From grade school up to high school.
Oh,
Yeah. That's
So-
the reason I can speak the language fluently.
mhm.
And-
There were several people of that type in which they were either sent as a bilingual specialist from the States to join during the occupation of Japan, or some of them were recruited just like me at that. We were all trapped there. We couldn't go back during the wartime. So they were recruited because they were badly in need of bilingual specialists. And we were doing some very important intelligence work. That was kind of very interesting.
So why did you decide to study bacteriology as an undergrad?
I liked science, chemistry, physics, but I wanted to handle something in living. And instead of just plain zoology, I thought studying germs and things like that might be interesting. That's the reason why I went into that. I used to dabble in nuclear physics in a lot of other areas, but the bacteriology or microbiology appealed to me most. And officially, I ended up my PhD in virology, study of viruses.
So, so where did you study as an undergrad?
I went to Penn State to get my bachelor's in bacteriology, and then I went to University of California, Berkeley to get my master's, and also in microbiology now. Then I got married and then had a job briefly, and went to New York on my first job to work with a drug company, Sterling Drug. But with a master's degree, I wasn't getting anywhere, so I went back to graduate school. By then I had 2 kids, but I continued my PhD work. And I went to Upstate Medical Center, which is the medical school of the State University of New York, and got my PhD there.
So how did you meet your wife?
I went to Japan. It was something like a traditional arranged marriages type of thing. Although I did meet several candidates, and so, but it ended up with a traditional way that somebody in the family goes in as an in-between, as a matchmaker, and to do that. So yeah, that's the way. And my wife was planning to study in the U.S., so when she was studying English, and all prepared to go to the States anyway. So that was one of the things in favor.
So what year were you married?
Yeah.
Oh, what year?
Gee, when was it? I have it down somewhere. 1964.
And were you married in Japan?
No.
Okay.
We were married in Berkeley, California.
And when were your children born?
They were born in Albany, New York, and they were born around the years 64. My son was born in 64. My daughter was born in 67.
Okay. And where did they attend school?
They, ever since then, wherever we went, well, from there we went from Albany to Syracuse, New York, for doing my graduate study. That's where the medical center was.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was doing PhD work. So they were there briefly, Syracuse. From that, my first job after getting my PhD, I went to Des Moines, Iowa to teach at a medical school. So we were there for only 2 short years. Then we came back to New York, stayed in the suburbs, Hartsdale, which is the suburbs of New York, and I was a faculty at New York Medical College.
And you said your wife wanted to come to the States to study also?
At that time, she was prepared to. So one of the reasons is that I thought it would be kind of harsh to take a Japanese woman simply because married, to take her away from the family where she lived, brought up, to a foreign country and all that. So it would have been kind of cruel. So I thought maybe somebody who is already prepared to go abroad had an advantage.
And where did she study?
Immigrant.
Where did she study?
Where did she study?
She went to the, let's see, remember now. It's one of the few, some years ago, not saying this, the name will come up. It's one of the few Catholic universities that is in the Tokyo area.
Oh, okay.
The name just skips my mind right now. This is why she acquired the English background.
Oh, okay.
Got to know.
So did she end up studying abroad in the U.S.?
No. She never went back to school.
Oh, okay.
Is she initially from Tokyo?
Yeah, with Tokyo suburbs, actually in Chiba area, right next door. One thing interesting about her family is that she comes from, her father was I think a middle school principal, and my mother's side is a Buddhist priest that was dispatched by the Japanese government to go to Hawaii to administer the necessary rituals for the Buddhists who immigrated to the U.S. Because there was a need. You do need a priest to get married and to have a burial service, funerals, that type of thing. So he was one of the, and quite a high-ranking Buddhist minister too.
So he was a Buddhist minister.
That's right, yeah.
So he could be married.
Yes. He went to Hawaii first, then he moved to San Francisco. They were there during that big San Francisco earthquake, so then they moved to Los Angeles. And I think that's where my mother was also born. And then after that, we were born. So.
Did you speak Japanese at home?
Of course, while in Japan, no. This is something interesting. While in Japan, even during the wartime, though, my father said, "You're not going to forget English, so we're going to use English." But you have to be careful, though, because so that's the only reason I retained my English. Otherwise, I would have had nobody to speak to. So that really helped quite a lot. But as I said, when I went to Japan, I didn't know a word of Japanese, even though I was 6 years old. Only knew English. So, but it also helped. Having English at school was an easy task. So.
Could you talk a little bit more about what it was like being a bilingual specialist?
Yes, I think this is kind of interesting. During the occupation forces, there are several tasks that the U.S. and Allied forces had to do. Is set up military government, to have liaison with the Japanese government, police forces, and everything, to make sure that the occupation ran smoothly. Also, the Far Eastern Tribunal, the war criminal courts, was in session. They needed interpreters there. They needed postal inspectors and other people to investigate crimes or any type of a legal matter. In order to rewrite some of the laws or something like that, to understand, they needed a lot of bilingual specialists. And I was attached to what we call the Allied Translator and Interpreter Service. We call it ATIS 8, and it was directly located under the G2 section. G2 is military intelligence, as you know. And we were under that. I think in our group we had about at least 200, maybe even 300 so-called Nisei, Japanese Americans there. And we were quite busy. Now, another thing that we were doing, and I can say this today, the Russians captured all the Japanese soldiers in Manchuria and China at the end of the war, and contrary to the Geneva Convention, they took them all to Siberia and used them for forced labor. And only later did they release them to allow to come back to Japan. And some of them never came back to Japan. And the ones that they were started to release them after 3, 4, 5 years, they were coming back, but they were repatriated to Japan. This is what we wanted to do. We interrogated these repatriates, we call them, Japanese prisoners of war, and to get a military intelligence from them. So when the soldiers came back, but on the returning ship, they were interrogated by some of us to find out if any of these are worth interviewing. Then when they went home, they were allowed to be called back at government expense to come to Tokyo to our office, to be interrogated. This was strictly voluntary too, but they get paid and fed and all that kind of stuff, including a cigarette ration. And this is what we were doing secretly. Was a confidential, because in those days the U.S. had very little military intelligence about Siberia, about what the Russians were doing. And the Japanese were 100% cooperative, because they didn't like the idea of being kept as prisoners of war for those number of years. Free labor and what? That's, again, it says it's in contrary to the Geneva Convention. You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
So they were really, they'll say, give all the information they knew. Another interesting thing is that the Soviet forces, the educational level and everything is, at least in the Siberian side, is very low. Their skills and everything is such that they can't drive the vehicle, they can't fix a car, they can't fix their weapons and all kind of stuff. Well, they have the Japanese POWs do it for them. They have the Japanese POW driving the company commander around on a car, because the Russians didn't have a driver who can do that. So the Japanese served an extremely important aspect of that. So they saw places, they saw the level intelligence. Some of them were actually hired to do some technical work.
Hmm.
But we found out quite a few things through this information. It was very interesting. I forgot the exact date of when it was, though. Through their testimony, we found out that the Russians had an atomic bomb.
Hmm.
It's not through the sources from they tested it in Europe somewhere, but we got that information through our interrogation of the Japanese prisoners of war. We learned about their secret high-speed telecommunication services and their code that they use between Siberia and Moscow. So those are some of the very interesting topics that we learned about. So it was a very valuable information.
Mm-hmm.
Now in Korea, that's a different thing. When the Korean War started, this was what we call this is strategic information. We actually need information on the front. We need to know directly. We personally did not go into the combat front, but we just interrogated POWs that were captured. Now the Koreans spoke Japanese. If they're older than 15, I would say, they all spoke fluent Japanese because they were under the Japanese occupation for all those years. Now, even though these North Koreans were somewhat opposed to the U.S. policy and all that, somehow or another, we were able to interrogate and find out, get specific information. I mean, how many people there, what kind of level, what kind of discipline, what kind of weapons do they carry, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a day-to-day information of what's going on the war front. Until the Chinese took up their side and joined, and then they started pushing down there. Then the population changed. Now we got Chinese prisoners of war, which then we didn't have any Chinese Americans who can do the interrogation. So until we got some, a few months later, a really funny thing happened. We used a trusted a South Korean, one of the Korean POWs in the camp. We had a lot of trustees at that time that can speak Chinese. So we used them as our interpreter.
Oh, okay.
So they will ask the question in Chinese, he will talk to me in Japanese, and I will write the report in English. And it worked out. Now, there was a major attitude difference because the North Koreans were very stubborn. The Chinese soldiers, even though they were supposed to be volunteers, was a totally different. I mean, it's a difference between a crude bumpkin and a city gentleman. It's that difference in terms of quality and training or whatever. And the Chinese POWs are extremely cooperative. They do not object to saying. Of course, they probably didn't say everything that was true, maybe, but we had no fuss. The North Koreans wanted to indoctrinate us who were asking questions. The Chinese POWs, no, nothing of that. They were just special forces. They were helping the war effort, and they just happened to be opposite from us. So we had a very good relationship. It was kind of fun. So that's the experience.
And can you tell, just so we can write it down have it in the archive, what years did you do all this?
This was from 19 51, 52, 53. Then we were discharged. I came back to the States and then went to college. So, so this was as soon as the war started. And the war started in 1951, I believe, during the summer months or something. By that fall, we were asked to go on a temporary duty to Korea to interrogate POWs.
Oh, okay.
It was an urgent thing.
So, upon your return to the United States, did you face any sort of discrimination for being Japanese?
No.
Not at all?
No. I don't recall any at that time, even though I heard from all the people who were there here, about the concentration camps and all that they had there. I heard from my relative that they all went to a camp.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't have that experience. I don't know. But the thing is, they didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think it was embarrassing, or they just wanted to forget it.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned very little from my relatives. They just didn't tell me. On the other hand, I suspect that we might find some, but no, surprisingly, no.
Mm.
It was at least that was not early experience. So it's so that was I guess kind of surprised, because I thought they might. Now even I think it's only a local thing. The discrimination, threat, and so forth of sending the Japanese or Japanese Americans to the concentration camp is because of the sheer number. That's what caused the scare.
Mm-hmm.
And they did it on the West Coast. They didn't send anybody in Hawaii.
No.
You know that, don't you?
Yeah, too many.
There are too many. They'll all be gone. I mean, the economy will stop. So isn't that funny? And that's closer to Japan.
Mm.
So they didn't do anything that got the people there. But in Hawaii, along the time, yes, they did. Canada, they did a little bit. But the Canada, they didn't send them to camps, concentration. They just sort of restricted their movement in their town. So it makes it, and even in Texas, only the head of households were sent to camp. The families, no.
Mm.
And so it's a quite a difference in terms of treatment. Texas had about 4 to 5 camps. 1 or 2, I guess, they did also include Germans, Italians, which you expect that you probably would have enemy aliens, but the Japanese are very few, and even then most of them were released before the end of the war.
Mm.
So,
what about in Tokyo? Did you ever face discrimination because during the war you came from?
yes, we did. I think our neighbors were somewhat, I won't say not that freely open-minded or everything, but I think, if anything, our parents probably must have felt that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure my father was probably watched very closely because his time of spending in the U.S. and all that. For us kids, no, not really. Surprisingly, it's since as long as I didn't use English, you couldn't tell.
Mm-hmm.
So no, unfortunately, and then after the war, of course, as things changed around, now we had a sort of advantage. So it was a kind of funny time period to go through that.
Was there a lot of anti-American propaganda in Tokyo at that time?
Oh yeah, you betcha. I mean, yeah, it's the white devils, everything you can think of. I mean, a lot of propaganda. The thing is that they did that. I think every country probably did that. But when you really see it, and then when you see the people, something like that, it's totally different. The Russians told their Japanese POWs saying that the Americans, the English are barbaric. They're raping your wives, your mothers, and your daughters. They're robbing things. They're getting drunk and all that kind of stuff. So tell them that it's not worth going back to Japan. And that's a bunch of lies and all along. Now, when they came back to Japan, it was totally the other way around. I mean, everything is peaceful, orderly. There's a law is obeyed. Well, there were some Americans that might have gone wild, but they were raping women or and that kind of stuff. So they did a lot of propaganda in that way. And the very interesting thing that observed is that within a year, the U.S. Army or armed forces had to set up camps in various parts of the country to station their troops. And normally, each camp, you have your own guards. You use your soldiers to do it. Well, we were hiring Japanese police to do it. I mean, he was your enemy just yesterday. He's now guarding your gate. And it's amazing. And there was not a single disruption, demonstration, anything. It just went so smoothly that it was unbelievable. So I think these stories are not that well known, but it was really amazing.
So was there a reaction at all to the bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima? Not as you think it was at that time, because they didn't know what it was. Okay.
It was only a few years later that they saw the extent of how horrible it was.
Oh, I see.
It was not. When they dropped that bomb, they would just mention a new type of was bombed and caused severe damage. That's it. No photos, nothing. Of course, you don't give away that kind of damage stories like that. But I was already very interested in science. I knew, and I already knew that there was such a thing as a possible atomic bomb, and it's surprising. I surprised myself too, thinking that, gee, that must be an atomic bomb that they used. If it was, it's really serious. So no, but people didn't realize it until later. Then the stories, documentation, movies, and about how many died at the same time, and then the subsequent cause of cancer and other diseases and so forth as a result, later on. And so that took several years.
Was there a fear during the war of American bombings all the time? Or?
Yeah, sure, yeah, because it was a saturated bombing. Although, depending on where you were, certain places were fairly excluded. Like there's a section part of the Tokyo downtown area that later on it was a first class office complex area near the Tokyo Central Railroad Station and right in front of the Imperial Palace. Those were purposely not even scratched. It was that type of precision bombing. because they had the idea if we're going to occupy that, we're going to use those buildings.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. No, this is all planned.
Mm.
No, this is what happened, and they did that. I lived in the suburbs in the Tachikawa. In Tachikawa area is equivalent to from here to let's say maybe Galveston. So that's pretty close. And there's an army airfield. Well, that was bombed, but the houses around it weren't touched. And even though Tokyo burned, the Tachikawa city area was hardly touched.
Mm.
And hospitals were not touched. No, it was pretty a accurate target destruction. But it's otherwise, it was kind of difficult because certain areas did burn down because the houses being made of paper and wood, it would just simply burn so quick that you couldn't stop it by the block or anything. It would just keep on burning. So a lot of neighborhoods just flattened out.
So this is a bit of a transition. What was it like? What was Houston like when you first moved here?
Here, I thought I liked it because after living in the New York area, which is very metropolitan, one of the best things that I liked is the international, the scenery here, the variation of the nationalities, available type of culture, stores. And of course, it's near within the distance from the seashore and all that. The only thing I didn't expect is the heat. I never lived in such hot heat. No. Although Des Moines, Iowa was pretty hot at times in the summer, but then of course it was deadly cold out there. Syracuse was deadly cold. Even Albany was very cold. But other than that, no, I really liked the city climate. And also, one thing I got to know is, among all the major cities I lived, I found Houston to be more accessible to people who you can, if you really want, you make an effort. I lived in many places, but because of what I did maybe, or because I was involved in the leadership in the Asian community, but I got to know every single mayor since 1981, every one of them. I get to meet all the chancellor presidents of all the universities. Let's see, I always knew several city councilmen. And also get to know some of the leadership in the Asian community. And before that, I didn't know other ethnic groups. But it comes across me as a Chinese, whether it's mainland or Taiwan, the Filipinos, Southeast Asian, Vietnamese, and all that. I never had that much access to the people like this. Also, Houston has a sizable Japanese trade mission here, business corporations. I sort of get to know all of those people, so I really enjoyed that privilege. It's very, very unique. And overall, you can golf year-round. And shopping is very good. Living expenses is a lot less than most major cities of this size.
So where did you first live when you moved to Houston?
Well, when I came back to the U.S., I lived in Philadelphia with my uncle briefly. That's a big city. And I liked it. It's old-fashioned. Then I lived, I went to Penn State, so that's nowhere, but it's way out, like Texas A&M, it's really hidden out in the middle of nowhere. It's a college campus town, so that's good. Then I lived, let's see, came back. No, from there I went to Berkeley to get to go to graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, San Francisco Bay Area is great. I mean, just living there, even a graduate student like that, it's a fabulous thing. I wish I could live there again. Right, then I got married and then came back, and then my first job was in Albany, New York, where Sterling Drug Company was there. And I had an important job there. But even though Albany is the capital of New York State, it had nothing. It really is nothing to offer. Then I decided to go back to graduate school. I went to Syracuse for the graduate work. Syracuse is somewhat a small town. Didn't have much. I don't think there are even 100 Japanese families there. There certainly is no. Syracuse probably had 2 Chinese restaurants. I think that's the only thing they had,
Wow.
even in those days. Then I got my first job as getting my PhD at Des Moines, Iowa, at a medical school there. Well, I don't know if you've ever been to Des Moines, Iowa, out that way right now. It's a peaceful, very rich town in a farm belt. And even though the Vietnam War is going on, so like that, everywhere they were demonstrating and all that kind of stuff, nothing in Des Moines. You don't even hear any disturbance. In those days, it's where you don't have to lock your doors anywhere. You can leave things in your car and unlocked, and nothing will be stolen. It is a totally different, peaceful community. The biggest excitement was the circus came into town. No, this is true. Believe me, I was shocked. That's the biggest thing that, for them. So I got out in a hurry, and 2 years later I went back to suburbs of New York City and lived in Hartsdale, New York, which, that was nice. I mean, I loved the access to New York City and all that. Then I was a professor at New York Medical College there, doing full-time research. Until, as I said, my boss decided to move his research grant to Houston, which was his hometown. But as I said, Houston, I was kind of reluctant because after all, it is a southern state, and it's going to be different. I've never been in the South. But surprisingly, it worked out nicely. So, and I said the international part, I think it was really good.
And you said that Houston had more international scenery than New York.
Yeah.
Can you explain more of
What?
that? The people, or?
Well, of course, New York has it. Chicago has it. Los Angeles has it. I would say I thought there's a little bit more liaison between them. They're not entirely separate. It's not a ghetto. It's an enclave, something like that. You see, New York had this Jewish enclave, Italian, Hispanic, Puerto Rican type thing. No, it's not that strong. Although right now, since then, there's a little tendency for that, but no, and I think because of that, it's a good thing.
In what area of Houston did you live in first?
I came here to inspect the area, and on day 3 I put down a down payment to buy a house in Alief.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I've been there ever since.
I was actually there the other day. So, can you explain what you do at Baylor College of Medicine now?
No, I left there about 7, 8 years ago. We lost our grants, so our group disbanded. But I've always taught at Houston Community College, so I've been a part-time instructor at Houston Community College since 1981.
Okay.
And I'm still teaching.
So what do you teach there?
Microbiology. Yeah. So I'm one of the longest part-timers there. Yeah, and I still will continue to do, since I enjoy doing it.
And what did you do at Baylor College of Medicine?
I did cancer research using viruses and as a model. Yeah, that was my PhD thesis.
So, have you noticed how Houston has changed since you came in the 80s to now?
Let's see, in what way can I describe that? Other than it's getting a little bit more crowded. I think in the 80s, it still had the image of a cow town. I mean, you really expect cowboys to be walking around the streets and all that kind of stuff. That image has certainly changed. There are a lot of transplants coming from the West Coast or New York or some other place are coming in. Even some of the Japanese Americans who opted to come over here to work for the oil companies, there's quite a few eventually start to come in because the pay is good. I think the makeup has changed. By the way, the Japanese Americans here opened up, as you see in this book, they were farmers, and they were starting to start rice farming, all that kind of stuff. Well, there are few still doing that, but that's not what they do anymore. They're practically, many of them are professionals. They're in business, and they integrated quite a ways, both men and women. Other than what changes, I don't know. I think it's getting a little bit more sophisticated, so to speak. I think culture-wise, educational level-wise, it's advanced quite a lot. It doesn't have that countdown image. The quaint part is kind of nice to have that as a historical tradition. That's okay, but you don't need that. And of course, the two major things are here. One is having NASA here to attract the highest density of computer, electrical, space engineers than any other place in the U.S. That's, although we're going to maybe start missing that. And the medical center is one of the world's top. And that attracts a lot of people, including a lot of visiting scientists and patients. I do a lot of interpretive work for the Japanese patients who come in here. And it's indeed a place to come to. And there's not too much mentioned anymore, but without much publicity, heads of state or many important people from South America and other places come here to get treatment here for surgery, for cancer treatment, all those kinds of things. So you can't beat that. You just can't. There's no other place. Even though New York has it, some cities will have a Sloan Kettering Institute. other types of institutes that care, but we have the top, I think.
Mm.
So that's a very good one. I'm glad I got my treatment at one of them. So I had a bypass surgery about 10 years ago.
Mm.
So what else you want to ask?
So how often would you go back and forth to Japan?
I'll be lucky that I can go back every 3 or 4 years, maybe.
Mm.
Before that, I used to go back once every 1 or 2 years.
Oh, okay.
My wife goes back every year,
Mm.
and it's right now. I had a lot of conflict because I teach year round, so I haven't had a chance to spend it. If I go there, I want to spend 2-3 weeks, maybe more,
Mm.
to make it worthwhile. But I think that I would like to do.
Would you take your children back when you used to go?
Yeah, right. Well, they're all grown up right now. They're all married, so.
But when they were children?
Yeah, but I would suggest they never. We took them there when they were 6 and 8, when they're quite young yet in the elementary school. But since then, they never went back there. So I think that I think they ought to do so.
Did you teach your children Japanese?
We tried, and we even had a tutor at some time, but they didn't like it, so we stopped. They didn't do it. Now they accuse us of not enforcing that. They tell us, why didn't you force us to do it? Because being a bilingual really is an advantage. Really is. Believe me. So, any other things about the Texans or thing?
Could you explain you were part of you're president of the Japanese Society of Houston, Japanese American Society of Houston, right?
Yeah, I was there. I'll be the president twice. Yeah.
Could you explain what the organization does?
It is a organization to promote exchange of ideas, a cultural learning, business contact between the two countries, and it's worked out very well. Many of them are expatriates from Japan who have experience, so they want to remain keep in touch with Japanese. So many of them want to do business with Japan, or they want to go to Japan in the future. Therefore, we promote a lot of scholarships and exchange students, so we do that. I think that's the attraction. So that's what they do. Economic-wise, Japan used to be a very important one, but although it's changed into China now, at one time Houston was extremely concerned of the depressed status of the city. The mayors promoted the trade with Japan, so it was a good idea to have an association with the Japan American Society, which promotes this. And it's worked quite well. I've gone there a few times on behalf of the city. Chiba City is a sister city to us. It is right next door to Tokyo. And I've been there several times. Once with the Mayor Brown at that time. So it's been it's a very good interaction there. Now, not as much, but there's a lot of things to learn or to exchange actually, and I think I don't know how strong the interrelationship is between, say, the city of Houston and any one of the sister cities in Europe or other places, but I think ours with Chiba is a very strong one. Even at the beginning of this year, the mayor of Chiba was here, and they were promoting exchange of businesses and international conventions and that type of a promotion they were doing here. I was an interpreter for the mayor when he came here, so I know about that. So I think that's kind of very good practice.
What about the Japanese community in Houston?
Well,
Have they been growing recently, or how's the situation?
On the other hand, I think if anything, the total number of Japanese companies have decreased slightly. Each company has also decreased their staff slightly. So not as active as before, but it is still a very important one because it's probably the strongest city in the South with a contingency of Japanese companies. Also, Houston is the stepping stone to South America. All the dispatches, technical staff, or people on special missions going to South America will stop at the Houston, not Florida, but Houston to go south. So the consulate here is a very important one. The JETRO is also a very important one to play as a stopping point to check with before doing that. Now it might not be as active. I'm not so sure, but it's still among the areas with the Japanese corporation. I think it's still going very strong. There's a certain number of people. If anything, they tend to hire maybe more non-Japanese in their staff. It's kind of interesting to be associated with as to what they're doing. I don't know if the other consulates are like that or not, but I've known all the consul generals, every one of them, in the past 30 years, and it's nice to have associated with them. Besides being getting invited to very nice receptions. Anything else with?
Oh, okay. What are some of your hobbies that you do in your free time?
I personally mine is community service, I think. I like to do that. And so this is why I volunteer for a lot of things. I volunteer for those organizations. I volunteer with the Asian American Festival Association. As a matter of fact, I was the first president of that. It started 20 years ago. I think it's dying out right now. Glenda Joe is gradually relinquishing that. I don't know why it's sort of coming apart. Apaha is probably doing a little bit more on that, but I know what they've been doing. So, other than that, I like to just keep track of the what's going on in the community. Oh, by the way, I'm also the Japanese editor of this newspaper. It's a monthly newspaper.
Okay.
Keep that copy. Some of it is in English right now, so you can read it. It's supposed to have been all Japanese, but now we use a lot of English in it.
So could you sorry.
To accommodate Japanese Americans who can't read Japanese.
So could you talk a little bit more about this newspaper?
That's what it's been going on for about 20 years. And it was a Japanese community newspaper that had only Japanese in it, and it was the only news source for people who weren't too good in English. And so that's the way it started. Now, the editor passed away suddenly about 1.5 years ago, and his wife took over, who's American, and she doesn't know any Japanese, so I volunteered to do the Japanese editing for her. We have a few reporters to cover that. Basically, we would like to have it both in English and Japanese, but that's kind of difficult to accommodate. So Some articles are strictly only in English, some of them are only in Japanese.
Mm.
Are you a regular writer in the?
Yes. I at least write one article in it. And I don't know if I can show you. I don't know if this is. I may not have had anything in this one. Maybe.
I know you wrote this one on the back.
Huh?
You wrote this one, right?
Does it say so?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Occasionally I do write. Some of it is written by the American, the lady, Norma Inafu is her name. Yeah, not on this one. Actually, I contributed one or two articles in it, but other than that, I do the editing to proofread, to make sure that it is arranged properly and all that. I also help out some of the advertisements to proofread all that. Here's the Deputy Consul General right now. And let's see. So anyway, this one now it's volunteer work, so I don't get a penny out of it, but it's kind of nice. It's the Japan American Society conducts various programs, or whenever any organization has on a program, we will publish it to let people know, because a lot of it is not covered in the local newspaper or any other means.
Mm-hmm.
Where is this newspaper usually distributed?
In all Japanese restaurants, and there's several in the along Bel Air and Chinatown. Actually, there's a list of where they distributed on that list in here. I think there's some of the names of them. Well, out of town is listed here, but there's about 20 or so. Yeah, there's some right here. Listen, so all of those. It's usually there, and it comes out around the middle of the month, so you might be able to see it there.
Mm.
We also have a homepage that we can put it out on a day's notice, so we can get a new article in it. So we may change to that without a hard copy form.
Mm. So how is this funded, since it is free?
Yeah, that's what you.
By advertisement.
Oh, by
Yeah,
advertisement, is it?
and then I don't know. I have no connection with the financing or the advertising part of it. That's Norma's the publisher's duty. So it's almost like that's her income, so to speak. I don't know if we can continue to publish it or not, but so that's one thing that we do. Now, other newsletters that do come out to tell everybody what's going on is the Japanese Association of Greater Houston. This is the Japanese speaking members. They want to sort of maintain a Japanese language organizations because as English there it's a little burden for them. So that's the only reason. Then the Japanese Business Association, which is like a chamber of commerce of all the businesses.
Mm.
There's also a Japanese Teachers Association, because there are about 50 or so teachers doing full-time Japanese teaching in Texas, and about 20 or 30 of them are in Houston. And let's see, one more organization. Oh, JCL. JCL, you know about JCL?
Mm.
Japanese American Citizens League.
Oh, okay.
Oh, right.
That's the national civil rights group.
Right.
And the Houston chapter, I was the president of that twice. Those are for Japanese Americans. Now, as Japanese Americans, we have about 80 families, members, but there are about 3 times that number that are permanent, residents in this area. We know they simply do not join JCL. It's one of the few. The civil rights issue has lost some of its attraction, and I think maybe because of that it is not attractive to join.
Hmm.
I think that's one of the reasons. The last project that we had is tried to change the name of a street in Beaumont called Jap Lane.
Oh, I heard about that.
Yeah, and so that was our last civil rights issue. So they changed that after we spent 10 years trying to change that.
Hmm.
And one is Jap Road, some is Jap Lane, and then there was another one somewhere in Texas that they also coincidentally changed because of this. So I was involved in helping the campaign on that. So, and then other than that, we don't have any special issue. The nationwide JCL right now is doing two things. To honor the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the old Japanese American soldiers that fought in Europe. You know about their story.
No.
It's the 442nd Regimental Combat Team made up of almost all Japanese Americans during World War II.
Hmm.
They, in the Italian front, when the 24th National Guard Division from Texas was surrounded by the Germans, they went in to rescue them.
Hmm.
And that made them all into heroes, and it's been remembered. So right now they're trying to honor those soldiers who are still surviving. Most of them are in their 90s right now. They're getting old. So those are the kind of things that they did. Other than that, and in 2003, we commemorate the 100th year of Japanese immigration into Texas. Do you know that? I don't know if you know that event or not.
Mm.
It's you can find it, some of it in on the internet. I don't know if I brought that here. Yeah, I think I did. We had, 2004. This is all from the internet. There's a Fairview Cemetery in Webster, and where the pioneer settlers in the Houston area are buried. And for the first time ever, people in those families were honored. And I like to brag the fact that I organized that. We had, well, I don't know if you see the first picture with everybody in there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, that's just part of them. I mean, that many people came from all over Texas and even from California to join that particular one. That's the first time they ever did anything, and it's in honor of the Saibara family, which is one of the families that's listed there.
Mm-hmm.
They all give the name that here. You can keep that copy.
Thank you.
Also the families that they met each other and all that. They really liked it, and it shows that there are a lot of other families that came here, have a tradition, and their descendants are still living here successfully in Texas. So it's you have to take a look at it.
Here you are.
Yeah, I was the MC for that, and it was very successful. I'm glad to say. There's some other types of things in here about. There's a marker on the highway. This is also about the Fairview Cemetery that I was talking about. It's a small cemetery with tombstones about 40, 50 Japanese who are old pioneer families. And if you can have a chance to take a look at it. I don't know if there's such things similar to that There must be something similar to that in Chinese groups or somewhere, isn't there? You know any?
Maybe.
Huh?
Mm.
And that's something too. It's oddly enough, and one small fact in here, the very first person who invited the immigration into the Houston area, Saibara. This is his picture.
Oh, wow.
And he is the original. He was a member of the lower house. He was the president chancellor of a leading Christian university. He came to the U.S., was introduced to Houston, to Texas, to start rice growing. He formed a colony, and eventually several hundred people came in here. That's actually brought in the Japanese. That's the descendants are right there. And this is where rice farming started.
Mm.
And so he started all of this. So he's a quite an interesting story. And actually, this book has all kinds of stories about that, a lot of detail. He wrote a diary which is in Japanese, but one of your graduate students wrote a thesis, translated that, wrote a thesis on doing the study there, and it should be in the files in the PhD records here at Rice. I think Dr. Barndermean probably may know who it was. So that's still on record. There might be other types of records or documents that are available telling the history. Also, there's a church in Webster called the Webster Presbyterian Church, which I think practically was founded by a Japanese American who supported the church, so it got going and still continues today. They have a little bit of archive and stories about that too. So if the Chow Center has a time to, that's something to look into. They also have a book. I'm not so sure what happened to it, but I still have a copy of that. It shows the early history of the Japanese Christians that arrived here in the Webster area. So that's something to look at. So there are several things that the Chow Center can really do if you really want to collect the archives of various types of things. And before I forget, this is a book that I borrowed. It's called the Japanese American 100-Year History in the United States, and it was published. What did I say a while ago?
60s, right?
Yeah, 90 something. And it gives all the Japanese, the first generation. They list their families they're on. And let me see when it is. This is where Senator Kennedy was still alive, so you can look at the date on this again. Anyway, there's a section for all the states in here, including one section for Texas. I'm sure this edition is out of print. I don't think you can hardly. 1961 it was published. So this is quite an old one. And here is a section on the Japanese. Unfortunately, it's all in Japanese. This was published by a Japanese newspaper company that had an office in Los Angeles. Arai is a well-known name. Soma, Osaka, Yamamoto. Here says Texas here. This starts this history. So it actually tells you the history in the 1900s of who arrived and what they did, the number, the population, each family history, around Houston, suburbs. It's quite a thing. I know some of these names. I used to know this family, Katsuro, Kobayashi. Kobayashi's family is still here. Or Kobayashi is still here. I know there's several descendants. There's another Watanabe name living in this area here too. Saiba. Saiba, this is the one that I talked about. That's Seibu Saiba is the first person, his family here. And it goes till, well, quite a few. So, although Hawaii or California have a larger section, still it's a significant. I think this is the first ever written documentation of the very first families who came here. So I don't think there's no other documentation. So one of these days, maybe somebody should translate this and have an English version.
Where did you find this book?
A friend of mine, one of the descendants' families, loaned me this. As a matter of fact, it was loaned by this family called Kawahata right here. Here's the name of it. One of the girls here, and I happen to know them. They can't read Japanese, so I borrowed it. But I found it. It's really interesting to have a record of all these people. So, and even then, these are already old people, and that's 80 something. So 20, 30 years ago. So and so these are something that are available. I don't know. Maybe I could have them either donate that to your archive or something eventually. So anyway, you ought to know that something like this does exist, and we can refer to it as history. Now, this guy who did do this research here is back in Oklahoma. That's where he originally came from, Tom Wells. So I don't think he's following up on anything about the Japanese group anymore, unfortunately. It'd be kind of nice if he could update this book, but it's a very well written book. Now, who's this other fellow that wrote The Asian Texans? Trying to remember his name. Do you know?
No, I don't remember.
He did the same thing for all the other Asian groups. So, and part of it has a little bit about the Japanese groups too. I'll try to find that book. So that should be somewhere in your records somewhere if you're gonna build an archive. Let's see, other than that, another movement right now is, as I said, and that 442nd Combat Team. They're making a history and honoring them right now, and they're going to make I think the country is going to make some kind of gold medal or something to honor them before they pass away, sometime this year. And they're going to have a celebration in Washington, D.C. about that. So if anything substantial comes up, I'll let you know about that. But what other types of things do you plan to do?
This is actually the last cycle of interviews we're doing.
Okay.
The first cycle were Chinese Americans, second cycle were Indian and Pakistani Americans, and third cycle were Filipino Americans, and Japanese Americans are the last cycle.
Okay, all right. Did you catch any Koreans or?
We have not done Koreans or Vietnamese.
You haven't?
But we'll probably be continuing this project next summer and after that.
Last summer was the first.
Okay, yeah. Oh, so it's been going on for a few years then. Yeah, well, good luck. And I think it's worthwhile doing it. Somebody ought to do it. There's no question. And it's something that you can handle. As I said, if this is in California or something like that, it's overwhelming. There's just too many.
Yeah.
It's just overwhelming. But here it's manageable. Well, so I wish you luck on that. Also, are you collecting either photos or some type of
We
thing?
are.
If I can find it, this 100-year event was filmed.
Oh.
Okay.
And the JCL group commissioned a videographer to film it. So I just have to find that, and I think we can donate a copy to
that'd be
you.
Yeah, if you have any pictures,
I mean, something like that is worth having. Because as I said, it is a significant event to commemorate 100 years of immigration. So,
I'd like to thank you again for
yeah, sure.
Thank you
doing
so
this interview
much.
today.
I don't know, but I thought maybe